The morning sun streamed through the towering glass windows of Haven Designs, casting a golden glow on the sleek, modern office space. For Sophia Carter, this was supposed to be the start of her dream career. As a young architect with a passion for sustainable design, she had worked tirelessly to land a position at one of the most prestigious firms in the city. Today was her first day, and she had spent the entire weekend preparing, choosing the perfect outfit, rehearsing her introduction, and mentally mapping out how she would make a stellar first impression. But life, as Sophia would soon learn, had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected them. She adjusted her blazer nervously as she stepped into the building's grand lobby, her portfolio clutched tightly in one hand. The air smelled faintly of fresh coffee and polished wood, and the hum of quiet conversations filled the space. Everything about Haven Designs exuded sophistication, from the minimalist decor to the impeccably dressed employees who moved with purpose. Sophia took a deep breath, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor as she approached the reception desk. "Welcome to Haven Designs," the receptionist greeted her with a warm smile. "You must be Sophia Carter. Let me get your temporary badge." Sophia nodded, her heart pounding with a mix of excitement and nerves. This was it, the beginning of everything she had worked for. She had spent years studying architecture, pouring her soul into every project, and now she was finally here, ready to prove herself. But as she stepped into the elevator, her confidence wavered. What if she wasn't good enough? What if the other architects were more talented, more experienced? She shook her head, banishing the doubts. "You've earned this, Sophia. You belong here." The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, revealing the 25th floor, the heart of Haven Designs. The open concept office buzzed with energy, and Sophia couldn't help but feel a surge of inspiration. This was where ideas came to life, where buildings that shaped the city were born. Little did she know, her carefully planned first day was about to take a very unexpected turn. A spilled coffee, a wrong door, and a chance encounter with the enigmatic CEO, Ethan Blake, would set off a chain of events that would change her life forever. As Sophia stepped into the office, she had no idea that this was the beginning of a story she would one day tell with both laughter and tears. A story of ambition, love, and the unexpected twists that make life worth living. Sophia Carter had always prided herself on being prepared. She was the kind of person who carried an extra pen, a backup charger, and even a small sewing kit in her bag just in case. But no amount of preparation could have saved her from what happened next. It started with coffee. She had been standing in line at the firm's exclusive cafe, mentally rehearsing her introduction to her new team. The cafe was a sleek, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city skyline. Sophia had just ordered her usual, a caramel latte with oat milk, when disaster struck. A harried intern, balancing a tray of drinks and a stack of blueprints, backed into her. The collision sent her coffee flying, the warm liquid cascading down the front of her cream-colored blouse. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," the intern stammered, his face pale with panic. Sophia forced a tight smile, trying to suppress the rising wave of embarrassment. "It's fine, really," she said, though the sticky fabric clinging to her skin told a different story. Clutching her bag tightly, she made a beeline for the nearest restroom, or at least what she thought was the restroom. In her haste, she pushed open a door marked "Private" and stepped into what appeared to be a small conference room. The space was immaculate, with a polished mahogany table, leather chairs, and a large mirror on one wall. "This will have to do," she muttered under her breath, setting her bag down on the table. She quickly pulled out her emergency backup blouse, a simple white button-up her mother had insisted she carry just in case. As she unbuttoned her ruined blouse, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. Her cheeks were flushed, her dark hair slightly disheveled from the morning rush. She sighed, shaking her head. "Not exactly the first impression I wanted to make." And then it happened. The door opened. Time seemed to slow as Sophia turned toward the sound, her heart leaping into her throat. Standing in the doorway was a man, tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and his piercing blue eyes locked onto hers with a mix of surprise and amusement. For a moment, neither of them moved. Sophia's mind raced. Who is this? Why is he here? And why, of all times, did this have to happen now? This isn't what it looks like, she stammered, clutching her backup blouse to her chest. The man raised an eyebrow, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. I'm not sure what it looks like, but it's certainly the most interesting thing I've walked into all week. Sophia's face burned with humiliation. I thought this was the restroom, she blurted out, her voice higher than usual. I didn't mean to. It's fine, he interrupted, his tone calm and reassuring. But for future reference, this is a private conference room. Her stomach dropped. Private conference room? Oh no. What if he's someone important? I'm so sorry, she said quickly, fumbling to button her blouse with trembling fingers. I'll just, get out of your way. But as she reached for her bag, her hand brushed against a heavy glass paperweight on the table. In her panic, she accidentally knocked it over, sending it clattering to the floor. The man chuckled softly, his deep voice filling the room. Relax, it's just a paperweight, no harm done. Sophia finally managed to button her blouse and straighten her posture, though her cheeks were still flaming. I really am sorry, she said, meeting his gaze for the first time. His eyes were striking, intense, yet warm, like the ocean before a storm. Apology accepted, he said, his smile widening. Though I have to admit this is a first for me. I don't usually find people changing clothes in my conference room. Her heart sank. His conference room? Oh no, she whispered, realization dawning. You're not, are you? Ethan Blake, he said, extending a hand. CEO of Haven Designs. Sophia stared at him, her mind blank. This was Ethan Blake? The Ethan Blake? The man whose innovative designs had redefined modern architecture? The man whose name was practically synonymous with success in the industry? She stammered, completely at a loss for words. Ethan's smile turned slightly mischievous. And you must be Sophia Carter, our new junior architect. Her stomach churned. Great. Not only did I just humiliate myself in front of the CEO, but he also knows exactly who I am. I promise this isn't how I usually start my mornings, she said, attempting a weak smile. Ethan chuckled, his gaze softening. Don't worry, Ms. Carter. I've had worse first impressions, though I will say you've certainly made an impression. Sophia wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. Thank you, Mr. Blake. I'll, get out of your way now. As she moved toward the door, Ethan stepped aside, his expression thoughtful. One piece of advice, he said, his tone suddenly serious. Sophia paused, glancing back at him. Yes? Don't let one bad moment define your day, he said. You're here for a reason. Don't forget that. His words caught her off guard, and for a moment she saw something in his eyes, something genuine, almost vulnerable. Thank you, she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan nodded, his smile returning. Welcome to Haven Designs, Miss Carter. I have a feeling you're going to do great things here. As Sophia stepped out of the room, her heart was still racing. She had no idea what to make of Ethan Blake, but one thing was certain. Her first day at Haven Designs was off to a memorable start. Sophia Carter had hoped the rest of her first day at Haven Designs would be uneventful, but fate seemed to have other plans. After her mortifying encounter with Ethan Blake, she had tried to keep her head down, focusing on her work and avoiding any further embarrassment. But avoiding Ethan, as it turned out, was easier said than done. By mid-morning, Sophia had settled into her temporary desk in the open concept workspace. The hum of quiet conversations and the soft clatter of keyboards filled the air. She was reviewing blueprints for a new, eco-friendly housing project when a shadow fell across her desk. "Ms. Carter?" a familiar voice said. Sophia looked up, her heart sinking. Ethan Blake stood before her, his hands casually tucked into the pockets of his tailored suit. He looked every bit the confident CEO, but there was a glint of amusement in his eyes that made her stomach twist. "Mr. Blake," she said, forcing a polite smile, "how can I help you?" "I wanted to personally welcome you to Haven Designs," he said, his tone warm but professional, "and to let you know that I've assigned you to the Green Haven project." Sophia blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. The Green Haven project was one of the firm's most high-profile initiatives, a sustainable community development that had been making headlines for months. It was the kind of project architects dreamed of working on, and she had assumed it would be reserved for the firm's senior staff. "Me?" she asked, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Are you sure?" Ethan's lips quirked into a small smile. "I don't make decisions lightly, Ms. Carter. Your portfolio impressed me, and I believe you have the skills and vision to contribute to this project." Sophia's cheeks flushed with a mix of pride and anxiety. "Thank you, Mr. Blake. I won't let you down." "I'm sure you won't," he said, his gaze lingering on her for a moment before he turned to leave. "Oh, and one more thing," he added, glancing back over his shoulder. "You'll be working directly with me on this project." Sophia's stomach dropped. Of course, she thought, because working under the man who had witnessed her most embarrassing moment wasn't nerve-wracking enough. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, design sessions, and late nights at the office. Sophia threw herself into the Green Haven project, determined to prove herself. She spent hours researching sustainable materials, sketching innovative designs, and perfecting her presentations. Her dedication didn't go unnoticed, especially by Ethan. Ethan had a way of commanding attention without trying. Whether he was leading a meeting or reviewing blueprints, his presence filled the room. He was sharp, insightful, and unflinchingly honest, which Sophia both admired and found intimidating. But what surprised her most was his sense of humor. Despite his polished exterior, Ethan had a knack for lightening the mood with a well-timed joke or a playful comment. Miss Carter," he said one evening as they reviewed her latest design proposal. "Do you ever sleep, or do you just run on coffee and sheer determination?" Sophia glanced up from her laptop, startled by the question. "I sleep," she said defensively. "Sometimes." Ethan chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "Well, whatever you're doing, it's working. This design is brilliant." Sophia's heart swelled at the compliment, but she quickly tamped it down. She couldn't afford to let her guard down, not when rumors were already starting to circulate. The whispers began innocently enough. A passing comment here, a curious glance there. But as Sophia and Ethan spent more time together, the rumors grew louder. Some of her colleagues speculated that her rapid involvement in the Green Haven project was due to favoritism. Others hinted at something more personal between her and Ethan. Sophia tried to ignore the gossip, but it wasn't easy. She could feel the weight of their stares during meetings, hear the murmurs as she walked through the office. The worst part was that she couldn't entirely blame them. She had noticed the way Ethan's gaze lingered on her during presentations, the way his tone softened when he spoke to her, and if she was being honest with herself, she couldn't deny the spark of attraction she felt whenever he was near. But attraction was dangerous. It blurred lines, complicated relationships, and jeopardized careers. Sophia had worked too hard to get where she was, and she wasn't about to let her feelings or anyone else's derail her. The tension came to a head during a team meeting one Friday afternoon. The Green Haven project was nearing a critical phase, and the team was gathered in the main conference room to finalize the design plans. Sophia had spent the entire week preparing her presentation, and she was determined to make an impression. As she stood at the front of the room presenting her ideas, she could feel Ethan's eyes on her. His expression was unreadable, but his focus was unwavering. It was both unnerving and exhilarating. When she finished, the room erupted into a mix of applause and murmured approval, but not everyone was impressed. "Interesting," said Victoria Hayes, a senior architect who had been with the firm for over a decade. Victoria was known for her sharp tongue and even sharper designs, and she had made no secret of her disdain for Sophia. "But don't you think it's a bit ambitious for someone with so little experience?" Sophia's cheeks burned, but she kept her composure. "Ambition is what drives innovation," she replied evenly, "and I believe this design has the potential to set a new standard for sustainable architecture." Victoria raised an eyebrow, her lips curving into a faint smirk. "We'll see." The tension in the room was palpable, but before anyone could say more, Ethan spoke up. "I think Miss Carter's design is exactly what this project needs," he said, his tone firm. "Her vision aligns perfectly with our goals, and I have full confidence in her abilities." The room fell silent. Victoria's smirk faltered, and Sophia's heart raced. Ethan's words were a clear endorsement, but they also added fuel to the rumors. As the meeting adjourned, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that she had just crossed an invisible line. Later that evening, as Sophia packed up her things, Ethan appeared in the doorway of her office. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Do you have a moment?" Sophia hesitated, then nodded. "Of course." Ethan stepped inside, closing the door behind him. For a moment, he said nothing, his gaze fixed on the floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the city. When he finally spoke, his voice was laced with something she couldn't quite place. Regret, perhaps, or uncertainty. "I know the rumors have been difficult for you," he said, "and I want you to know that I take full responsibility for that." Sophia blinked, caught off guard by his candor. "You don't have to." "Yes, I do," he interrupted, turning to face her. "You've worked incredibly hard, and you've earned your place here. I don't want anyone to think otherwise." His words were sincere, but they only made Sophia's heart ache more. "Thank you," she said quietly. "But I can handle it." Ethan studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't have to," he said finally, "and I'll do everything I can to make sure you don't." As he left, Sophia sat back in her chair, her mind racing. She didn't know what to make of Ethan Blake, but one thing was certain: he was far more complicated than she had imagined. The weeks that followed were a blur of long hours and mounting pressure. The Greenhaven project was nearing its final stages, and the entire team was working tirelessly to meet the looming deadline. For Sophia, the work was both exhilarating and exhausting. She poured every ounce of her energy into perfecting her designs, determined to prove herself not just to Ethan, but to everyone at Haven Designs. But the rumors didn't stop. If anything, they grew louder. Whispers followed her through the office, and she could feel the weight of judgment in every glance. It didn't help that Ethan continued to show her unwavering support, his confidence in her abilities only fueling the speculation. Sophia tried to ignore it, but the tension was beginning to take its toll. She found herself second-guessing her decisions, questioning whether she truly deserved her place on the project. And then, one afternoon, everything came crashing down. It started with an email. Sophia was sitting at her desk, reviewing the final renderings for the Greenhaven project, when a notification popped up on her screen. The subject line read, "Urgent, design concerns." Frowning, she opened the email and felt her stomach drop. The email was from Victoria Hayes, and it was addressed to the entire senior leadership team, including Ethan. In it, Victoria accused Sophia of plagiarizing elements of her design from an earlier project, a project Victoria had worked on years ago. Attached to the email were side-by-side comparisons of Sophia's renderings and Victoria's old designs, along with a scathing message questioning Sophia's integrity and professionalism. Sophia's hands trembled as she read the email. The accusations were baseless. She had never even seen Victoria's old designs, but the similarities in certain elements were undeniable. She knew it was a coincidence, but would anyone else believe her? Before she could process what was happening, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Ethan. "Come to my office. Now." Sophia's heart pounded as she made her way to Ethan's office. The walk felt like an eternity, and by the time she reached his door, her palms were slick with sweat. She knocked hesitantly, and his voice called out, "Come in." Ethan was standing by the window, his back to her. The late afternoon sunlight cast long shadows across the room, and the tension in the air was palpable. He turned as she entered, his expression unreadable. "Close the door," he said. Sophia obeyed, her stomach churning. "Mr. Blake, Sit," he interrupted, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. She sat, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Ethan remained standing, his gaze fixed on her. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence stretching unbearably. "Do you have anything to say about the email Victoria sent?" he asked finally, his tone calm but firm. Sophia swallowed hard. "It's not true," she said, her voice shaking. "I didn't copy her designs. I've never even seen them before." Ethan studied her, his piercing blue eyes searching hers for any sign of dishonesty. "The similarities are striking," he said. "You have to admit that." "I know," Sophia said, her voice rising with desperation. "But it's a coincidence, I swear. I would never do something like that." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I believe you," he said quietly. Sophia blinked, caught off guard. "You do?" "Yes," he said, his gaze softening. "But this isn't just about what I believe. The leadership team is already questioning your credibility, and Victoria is pushing for an investigation." Sophia's stomach twisted. "An investigation? But I didn't do anything wrong." "I know," Ethan said, "and I'll do everything I can to clear your name. But until this is resolved, you'll need to step back from the Green Haven project." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. "Step back?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "But this project is everything I've been working for." "I know," Ethan said again, his voice heavy with regret. "But this is the only way to protect you and the project until we can prove your innocence." Sophia felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She nodded stiffly, rising from her chair. "Thank you for believing me," she said, her voice tight. "I'll do whatever you think is best." Ethan watched her go, his expression unreadable. As she closed the door behind her, Sophia felt a wave of anger and helplessness wash over her. She had worked so hard, sacrificed so much, and now it was all slipping through her fingers. The days that followed were some of the hardest of Sophia's life. She was removed from the Green Haven project, relegated to smaller, less significant tasks while the investigation played out. The whispers in the office grew louder, and she could feel the judgment in every glance. Even her closest colleagues began to distance themselves, afraid of being associated with her. But the worst part was the silence from Ethan. He had promised to clear her name, but he had been distant ever since their meeting. She knew he was under pressure from the leadership team, but she couldn't help feeling abandoned. One evening, as she sat alone in her apartment, staring blankly at her laptop, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Ethan. "Meet me at the rooftop terrace, 8 p.m. Sophia hesitated, her heart racing. She didn't know what to expect, but she knew she couldn't ignore him. The rooftop terrace of Haven Designs was one of the most beautiful spots in the city. It offered a panoramic view of the skyline, with twinkling lights stretching as far as the eye could see. When Sophia arrived, Ethan was already there, leaning against the railing with a contemplative expression. "You came," he said, turning to face her. "You asked?" she replied, her voice guarded. Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I owe you an apology," he said. "I should have done more to protect you." Sophia crossed her arms, her gaze steady. "Why didn't you?" Ethan hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Because I was trying to protect the project," he admitted, "and because I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" she asked, her voice softening. Afraid of what people would think, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Afraid of what it would mean for both of us if I defended you too strongly. Sophia's breath caught. Ethan? I care about you, Sophia, he said, his eyes locking onto hers. More than I should. And that's why I've been keeping my distance. But I can't do that anymore. Sophia's heart raced, a mix of emotions swirling inside her. She wanted to believe him, but the pain of the past few weeks was still fresh. You hurt me, she said quietly. You let me face this alone. I know, Ethan said, his voice filled with regret. And I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you, if you'll let me. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the city lights casting a soft glow around them. Finally, Sophia took a deep breath. I don't know if I can trust you, she said honestly, but I'm willing to try. Ethan nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. That's all I can ask. As they stood together on the rooftop, the tension between them began to ease, replaced by something softer, something fragile, but real. It wasn't a resolution, but it was a start. The days after their rooftop conversation were a whirlwind of emotions for Sophia. While Ethan's confession had stirred something deep within her, it didn't erase the pain of what she had endured. She needed time to think, time to heal, and time to figure out what she truly wanted. But time, as it turned out, wasn't something she would be given. The investigation into Victoria's accusations escalated quickly. Despite Ethan's efforts to defend her, the leadership team decided that Sophia's continued presence at Haven Designs was a distraction. They framed it as a temporary leave of absence, but Sophia knew what it really meant. She was being pushed out. The day she packed up her desk was one of the hardest of her life. The office, once a place of inspiration and excitement, now felt cold and unwelcoming. As she placed the last of her belongings into a box, she glanced around the room one final time. Her colleagues avoided her gaze, their silence cutting deeper than any words could. Ethan wasn't there to see her off. She hadn't expected him to be. He had been distant ever since their rooftop conversation, likely trying to manage the fallout from the investigation. But his absence still stung. As Sophia stepped into the elevator, clutching her box of belongings, she felt a mix of anger, sadness, and relief. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. She couldn't stay in a place where she wasn't wanted. Sophia moved to a new city a week later. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was a necessary one. She needed a fresh start, far away from the whispers and judgment that had haunted her at Haven Designs. She found a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood and began building her life from scratch. At first it was daunting. She had no job, no connections, and no clear plan. But Sophia had always been resilient. She spent her days sending out resumes, networking with other architects, and sketching designs in her tiny living room. Slowly but surely, she began to rebuild. One day, while scrolling through job listings, she came across an opportunity that caught her eye: a grant for independent architects to design a community center in an underserved neighborhood. The project was small, but it was exactly the kind of work Sophia had always dreamed of doing. She applied immediately, pouring her heart into the proposal. To her surprise, she was selected as one of the finalists. The grant committee invited her to present her design in person, and for the first time in months, Sophia felt a spark of hope. She threw herself into the project, working late into the night to perfect every detail. This was her chance to prove herself, not to anyone else, but to herself. Meanwhile, back at Haven Designs, Ethan Blake was struggling. The Green Haven project had been completed on schedule, but it didn't feel like a victory. Without Sophia, the project had lost its heart. Ethan couldn't stop thinking about her passion, her determination, and the way she had stood her ground even when the odds were stacked against her. He had tried to move on, burying himself in work and avoiding the empty conference room where they had first met. But no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had let her down. He had promised to protect her, and he had failed. One evening, as he sat alone in his office, Ethan received an email that stopped him in his tracks. It was from a former colleague who had worked with Victoria Hayes years ago. The email included a series of old design files that proved Victoria had plagiarized elements of her own work from another architect. The evidence was damning, and it completely exonerated Sophia. Ethan wasted no time. He forwarded the files to the leadership team, demanding that they issue a formal apology to Sophia and reinstate her position at the firm. But as he hit send, he realized something. Sophia deserved more than an apology. She deserved the truth, and she deserved to hear it from him. Sophia's presentation for the community center grant was scheduled for a Friday morning. She arrived at the venue early, her portfolio tucked under her arm and her heart pounding with nerves. The other finalists were seasoned architects with years of experience, and she couldn't help but feel out of place. But as she stepped onto the stage and began her presentation, all her doubts melted away. She spoke with passion and conviction, describing her vision for a sustainable, inclusive space that would serve as a hub for the community. Her design was simple yet innovative, blending modern architecture with natural elements to create a welcoming environment. When she finished, the room erupted into applause. As Sophia stepped off the stage, she felt a surge of pride. No matter what happened, she knew she had given it her all. But as she made her way to the back of the room, she froze. Standing near the exit, his eyes locked on hers, was Ethan Blake. "Ethan?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He stepped forward, his expression a mix of relief and determination. "Sophia?" he said, "I need to talk to you." She glanced around, aware of the curious stares from the other attendees. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her tone guarded. "I came to see you," he said simply, "and to tell you the truth." Sophia crossed her arms, her heart racing. "The truth about what?" "About everything," Ethan said. "Victoria's accusations, the investigation, why I didn't fight harder for you. I made mistakes, Sophia, big ones. But I'm here to make things right." He handed her a folder, his gaze steady. "This is the evidence that clears your name. Victoria was the one who plagiarized, not you. The leadership team is issuing a formal apology, and your position at Haven Designs is waiting for you if you want it." Sophia stared at the folder, her emotions swirling. Relief, anger, and gratitude all fought for dominance. "Why now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I couldn't let you go without a fight," Ethan said, his voice raw. "I care about you, Sophia. I always have. And I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway." Sophia's breath caught. She had spent months trying to forget Ethan, trying to move on. But now, standing in front of him, she realized that her feelings for him hadn't disappeared. They had only been buried under the weight of her pain. "I don't know if I can trust you," she said honestly. "You hurt me, Ethan. You let me face everything alone." "I know," he said, his voice filled with regret. "And I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you, if you'll let me." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, slowly, Sophia reached for the folder. "I need time," she said quietly. "Time to figure out what I want." Ethan nodded, his expression softening. "Take all the time you need," he said. "I'll be here." As he turned to leave, Sophia felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she was willing to find out. 2 years had passed since Sophia Carter had left Haven Designs, and in that time, her life had transformed in ways she never could have imagined. The community center project she had pitched for the grant had not only been approved, but had also become a resounding success. Her design had been praised for its innovative approach to sustainability and inclusivity, and the project had earned her recognition as one of the most promising young architects in the industry. Sophia had built her own small design studio, Carter & Co., and was finally living the life she had dreamed of, on her own terms. She had moved past the pain of her time at Haven Designs, or so she thought. But there were still moments, late at night, when her thoughts drifted to Ethan Blake. She hadn't seen or spoken to him since their last conversation at the grant presentation. He had kept his promise, giving her the time and space she needed, but his absence had left a void she couldn't quite fill. Sophia told herself she had moved on. She had her work, her friends, and her independence. But deep down she knew there was a part of her heart that still belonged to Ethan. It was a crisp autumn morning when Sophia found herself back in the city where it had all begun. She had been invited to speak at an architecture expo, a prestigious event that brought together some of the brightest minds in the field. As she walked through the grand exhibition hall, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She had come so far from the nervous young architect who had once spilled coffee on herself in the Haven Designs cafe. Her presentation was scheduled for the afternoon, so she spent the morning exploring the exhibits. She was admiring a scale model of a new urban development when a familiar voice stopped her in her tracks. Sophia. She turned slowly, her heart skipping a beat. Standing a few feet away, looking as composed and confident as ever, was Ethan Blake. He was dressed in a charcoal gray suit, his dark hair slightly tousled, and his piercing blue eyes locked onto hers. "Ethan?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, neither of them moved. The noise of the expo faded into the background as they stood there, caught in a moment that felt both surreal and inevitable. "You look amazing," Ethan said finally, his voice soft but sincere. Sophia felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "Thank you," she said. "You look the same." Ethan chuckled, the sound warm and familiar. "I'll take that as a compliment." There was an awkward pause before Ethan spoke again. "I saw your name on the program," he said. "I couldn't believe it at first, but then I thought, of course you'd be here. You've always been brilliant." Sophia's heart ached at his words, but she forced herself to stay composed. "Thank you," she said. "I've been busy." "I can see that," Ethan said, gesturing to a nearby poster featuring her name and photo. "Carter & Co. is making waves. I'm proud of you." Sophia hesitated, unsure of how to respond. She wanted to ask him why he was here, what he wanted, but before she could, a small voice interrupted them. "Money." Sophia turned, her breath catching as her 2-year-old son Liam toddled toward her. He had her dark hair and Ethan's piercing blue eyes, and he was clutching a small toy car in his tiny hands. Ethan froze, his gaze shifting from Sophia to Liam. For a moment, he looked as though the ground had been pulled out from under him. "Sophia?" he said, his voice barely audible. "Is he—" Sophia nodded, her throat tightening. "Yes," she said quietly. "He's your son." Ethan's eyes filled with a mix of shock, wonder, and something else, something deeper. He crouched down, his voice soft as he spoke to Liam. "Hi there," he said. "What's your name?" Liam looked up at him with wide, curious eyes. "Liam," he said shyly. Ethan smiled, his expression filled with awe. "Hi, Liam. I'm your dad." Sophia's heart clenched as she watched the two of them. She had spent so long imagining this moment, wondering how Ethan would react, and now that it was happening, she didn't know what to feel. Liam glanced at Sophia, seeking reassurance. She nodded, giving him a small smile. "It's okay, sweetheart," she said. "This is your daddy." Liam hesitated for a moment before stepping closer to Ethan, holding out his toy car. "You play?" he asked. Ethan's smile widened, and he took the car gently from Liam's hands. "I'd love to," he said. As Ethan and Liam sat on the floor, rolling the car back and forth, Sophia felt a wave of emotions crash over her. She had spent the past 2 years trying to protect Liam, trying to shield him from the complications of her past. But seeing him with Ethan now, she realized that she had been shielding herself, too. Later that evening, after the expo had ended and Liam had fallen asleep in his stroller, Sophia and Ethan found themselves alone on a quiet balcony overlooking the city. The air was cool, and the lights of the skyline twinkled in the distance. "Well, didn't you tell me?" Ethan asked, his voice filled with both hurt and curiosity. Sophia sighed, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I didn't know how," she admitted. "After everything that happened, I didn't think you'd want to be a part of our lives, and I didn't want Liam to grow up feeling unwanted." Ethan shook his head, his expression pained. "Sophia, I would have been there in a heartbeat. I would have done anything to be with you, to be with him." "I know that now," she said softly. "But back then, I was scared. I didn't trust you, Ethan, and I didn't trust myself." Ethan reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "I made mistakes, Sophia. I let you down when you needed me most, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But I'm here now, and I want to be a part of Liam's life and yours, if you'll let me." Sophia looked at him, her heart aching with a mix of love and fear. "I don't know if we can just pick up where we left off," she said honestly. "Too much has happened." "I'm not asking for that," Ethan said. "I'm asking for a chance to prove to you that I've changed, a chance to be the father Liam deserves and the partner you deserve." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded slowly. "Okay," she said. "We'll take it one step at a time." Ethan smiled, his eyes shining with hope. "That's all I need." As they stood together on the balcony, the city lights casting a soft glow around them, Sophia felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. It wasn't a perfect ending, but it was a new beginning, and for the first time in years, she was ready to embrace it. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of rebuilding trust and finding a new rhythm. Ethan made good on his promise to be present, showing up for Liam in ways that surprised and touched Sophia. He took Liam to the park, read him bedtime stories, and even learned how to make his favorite snack, peanut butter and banana sandwiches. Watching them together filled Sophia with a bittersweet mix of joy and hesitation. She wanted to believe Ethan had changed, but the wounds of the past still lingered. Ethan, however, wasn't one to give up easily. He knew that words alone wouldn't be enough to win Sophia's trust. He needed to show her, through actions, that he was committed not just to Liam, but to her as well. And so, he began planning something that would prove how much he believed in her dreams and her talent. One crisp Saturday morning, Ethan called Sophia and asked her to meet him at a construction site on the edge of the city. She was hesitant at first, unsure of what he was up to, but his tone was so earnest that she couldn't refuse. She bundled Liam into the car and drove to the address he had given her, her curiosity growing with every mile. When she arrived, she found Ethan waiting for her in front of a large, partially constructed building. He was dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, but there was a nervous energy about him that she hadn't seen before. "What is this?" Sophia asked, stepping out of the car and lifting Liam into her arms. Ethan smiled, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "This," he said, gesturing to the building, "is your dream." Sophia frowned, confused. "What are you talking about?" Ethan took a deep breath. "Do you remember the community center design you showed me back at Haven Designs? The one you said you'd always wanted to build but never got the chance?" Sophia's heart skipped a beat. "Of course I remember," she said. "But what does that have to do with this?" "This is it," Ethan said, his voice filled with emotion. "I bought the land, secured the permits, and started construction. It's your design, Sophia. I wanted to bring it to life for you, for Liam, and for the community." Sophia stared at him, her eyes filling with tears. "Ethan, I don't know what to say. Say you'll let me help you finish it," he said softly. "Say you'll let me be a part of your dream." For the first time in years, Sophia felt the walls around her heart begin to crumble. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's do it together." The months that followed were some of the most fulfilling and transformative of Sophia's life. Working alongside Ethan to complete the community center was a journey that brought them closer together, not just as co-creators, but as a family. The project became a labor of love, blending Sophia's vision and creativity with Ethan's unwavering support and determination. Ethan threw himself into the work, not just as a financial backer but as an active participant. He attended every meeting, helped coordinate with contractors, and even spent weekends on site, hammering nails and painting walls. It wasn't just about the building, it was about proving to Sophia that he was in this for the long haul. And slowly, bit by bit, her trust in him began to grow. Liam, too, became a regular fixture at the construction site. The workers adored him, often letting him help by handing them tools or painting small sections of the walls. His laughter echoed through the space, filling it with a warmth that reminded Sophia of why she had dreamed of this project in the first place. It wasn't just about architecture. It was about creating a place where people could come together, connect, and feel a sense of belonging. The grand opening of the community center was scheduled for a sunny spring afternoon. The building, now complete, was everything Sophia had envisioned and more. Its sleek modern design was softened by natural elements like wood and greenery, creating a space that felt both innovative and welcoming. Inside, there were classrooms, a library, a play area for children, and a large open hall for community events. It was a place that radiated hope and possibility. On the day of the opening, the center was buzzing with activity. Families, city officials, and members of the community gathered to celebrate the occasion. Sophia stood near the entrance, greeting guests and trying to keep her emotions in check. She had worked so hard for this moment, and now that it was here, it felt almost surreal. Ethan appeared at her side, holding Liam's hand. "You ready?" he asked, his voice warm and steady. Sophia nodded, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I think so." As the ceremony began, Sophia was invited to the stage to give a speech. She took a deep breath, looking out at the crowd. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "This community center is more than just a building. It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we come together, when we believe in each other, and when we dare to dream." She paused, her gaze shifting to Ethan and Liam, who were standing near the front. "This project wouldn't have been possible without the support of so many people, but there are two people I need to thank in particular. My son, Liam, who inspires me every day to be better, and Ethan Blake, who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself." The crowd erupted into applause, but Sophia barely heard it. Her eyes were locked on Ethan, who was looking at her with a mixture of pride and love that took her breath away. Later that evening, after the guests had left and the center had quieted down, Sophia and Ethan stood together in the main hall, watching Liam play with a group of children. The setting sun cast a golden glow through the large windows, bathing the room in warm light. "You did it," Ethan said softly, turning to her. "You made your dream come true." Sophia smiled, her heart full. "We did it," she corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you." Ethan hesitated for a moment, then reached for her hand. "Sophia," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I know I've made mistakes, and I know I have a lot to make up for, but I love you. I've loved you from the moment I met you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." Sophia's breath caught. She had spent so long guarding her heart, afraid to let him in again, but as she looked into his eyes, she realized that she didn't need to be afraid anymore. Ethan had shown her time and time again that he was willing to fight for her, for Liam, and for their future. "I love you too," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I'm ready to move forward together." Ethan's face lit up with a smile, and he pulled her into his arms. For the first time in years, Sophia felt truly at peace. She had found her place, her purpose, and her family. As they stood there, holding each other in the glow of the setting sun, Sophia knew that this was just the beginning of their story. Together, they would face whatever challenges came their way, building a life filled with love, laughter, and endless possibilities.